this is a story that came out of San Francisco. I'd said Seattle earlier. My apologies. It's San Francisco, and which is interesting because when I was 17, literally, I spent a number of weeks in San Francisco that summer of 1968, panhandling in San Francisco. So probably not. Well, actually, this is on Market Street. I panhandled on Market Street. But those were different times, and it was a different era, and it was a different event. And I mean, for me, it was a lark more than a survival thing. This is survival for this young woman. Her name is Megan. I don't want to get into her last name on the air, but it's in this article in today's Guardian, theguardian.com. She is homeless. She has a 6-week-old child. She has a severe back conditions, presumably, severe scoliosis or degenerative disc disease or something like that. And she sits on Market Street, which is, kind of like the main street that runs through the center of San Francisco. She sits there, panhandling for money with her baby in her arms and her baby stroller next to her and her little dog. And a number of people this is kind of like it bounced around the right-wing media first, and now it's bouncing around the left-wing media. And it's fascinating. this is at the same time that Bill de Blasio is saying that he's going to ban panhandling in New York. Sacramento is thinking about making it a crime to panhandle, according to this article in The Guardian today by Aaron McCormick. Sacramento considering making it a crime to panhandle at intersections, ATMs, and gas stations. There's an economist who's saying better idea is to accredit panhandlers. And Seattle, a nonprofit organization in Seattle, has launched a new app that does just that. But in any case, this a 70-year-old woman, Deidre Lakin, stood next to this younger. I say she's young. She's 34 years old. Stood next to Megan holding a sign saying "Women Against Child Abuse." The assertion being that holding your baby while you're panhandling is child abuse. Now, I've been all around the world a bunch of times, and I've had a lot of women, particularly in India, and somewhat, and not so much, but also somewhat in the Philippines and in other parts of Asia, had women with babies follow me down the street begging for money, standing at street corners, at stoplights, begging for money with their babies. And so, what are the definition of child abuse? Well, Lakin says one of the definitions of child abuse is using a child for exploitation or financial gain, and this woman is making a lot of money. That's the quote from the 70-year-old woman who stood next to Megan with a sign basically condemning her. Now, I would submit to you that and Megan is on Social Security disability because of her back, and she uses the panhandling money to buy extra things for her baby. And I would suggest to you that this is a symptom, not a cause. The Megan's panhandling with her baby is a symptom of a breakdown in San Francisco, but not just San Francisco, all across our country. You can travel all over Western Europe and never see a panhandler. That's not true of the United States anymore. And in fact, so what we need is a smart approach to housing. Why is this young woman, why is she homeless? Because, if you're living on Social Security disability, you cannot afford to live in San Francisco. And frankly, there's a lot of people who work in San Francisco who can't afford to live in San Francisco. Now, Megan, she was in Minneapolis. She came to San Francisco because, she said, I didn't want to freeze to death in the winters. And I'm a homeless person. I live on the streets. I get that. And maybe she's got, a lot of homeless people have serious psychological problems. Schizophrenia is one of the more common things. And maybe that's her. I don't know. But shouldn't we have, what we're doing here is we're letting this brutal free market run housing policy to a large extent. I realize there are some reasonable housing. She's living in a homeless shelter with this kid. And a homeless shelter, by the way, that has a 9-week waiting list. And she's disabled and she needs help. And she's just saying, hey, I'm taking care of myself here, myself and my daughter. I'm out here panhandling by way of taking care of my child. You should be praising me. So she's promoting this kind of dark libertarian freedom notion about individual responsibility. And we're all judging her. I'm not willing to judge this woman. She's staying at a place called Hamilton Families. The number of homeless families in the city has jumped from around 600 in 2007. It's just before the housing crash, right? Which, by the way, made millions of Americans homeless. Or hundreds of thousands, anyway, threw millions of Americans out of their homes. 600 in 2007 to 1,100 today. The number of homeless families in the city of San Francisco. It says that there are so many families needing housing that there is a wait of 6 to 9 months to get into shelter programs. And Rachel Kennemore of Hamilton Family said, it doesn't help the demonized families in need. She said, let's be part of the solution on this. What can we do to be supportive to members of our community who need help? And then they comment about how people walk by as she's panhandling. Sometimes people hand her dollar bills. Sometimes they bring her food. Sometimes they offer clothes. And then one woman walks by and yells out, why is your baby out here? And Megan shakes her head and says she has no intention of being scared away by the critics. I do what I need to for my child. What would you do in a situation? I realize, most of us are sufficiently privileged that we have family we can fall back on. We have friend networks we can fall back on. These things tend to evaporate as mental illness sets in, which is another thing that causes me to suspect that this young woman has some form of mental illness. But how do we react to this? What sort of policies should we be looking at? How do we change our country in a way that is more compassionate, more considerate? Is it even possible? I would suggest that our 40-year fascination with the brutal free market and this essentially violence-laced libertarian economics is really at the core of a lot of this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Not to mention Reagan closing the mental hospitals and kicking off a wave of homelessness and street people in the country that we hadn't seen before the 80s.